Hello and welcome to a Friday edition of the Osceola Seminoles Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by Rivals National Recruiting Analyst Sam Spiegelman. Sam, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, hey Pat, thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. If I don't know if you guys follow Sam on Twitter, but he's one of the busiest men in college football recruiting. He's always breaking new stuff, and we've been following each other for the last couple of months. And it seems like a lot of the guys he's reporting on, Florida State's involved with in some capacity. So we wanted to have Sam on, and Sam, listen, how's it going out there? I mean, you've been. I know you were at Under Armour. I believe you were at Under Armour camp this past weekend. There's been several of those. You got any down? We were just talking about this before the show. You got any downtime lately?
Yeah, it's like, it's I guess like I'm off because I'm working from home this weekend, but I still got plenty of stuff to do. Like, as you kind of reference, official visits are still being set up. Offers are still being thrown out. It's still February. It's still, back in the day, this was still the early part of the recruiting cycle. Now things are expedited where official visits are already being lined up, and you understand that for 2026 kids, they're going to be largely committed by the time their senior seasons start. But that doesn't mean that everything isn't still, pretty busy in between. And obviously with new offers that come in January, you got to get maybe your first or second visit before you make an official visit. So things are still moving. No recruitment is really locked up just yet, but you're seeing some commitments here and there on the recruiting trail left and right, and the foundations of a lot of classes are being formed. So yeah, unfortunately, recruiting doesn't stop.
Yeah, and listen, February is kind of turning into calendar month, right? The calendar goes dead, and all these players are starting to fill out their calendars for March and April unofficial visits. And the question I know that you're asking, and that we're asking a lot of these players is, hey, who are you going to visit officially? When are you going to visit? And the one thing that I've seen, Sam, is we're starting to see these kids really start these official visits early. I reported on one kid today. His first official visit's April 11th. His last one's in June. I can't remember who that is off the top of my head. I've written about so many kids or updated so many notes on so many kids today. But listen, I think, and do you think we'll see more of that with the unlimited official visits? It used to be tradition. You only could take 5. That's now gone by the wayside. We see a lot of guys that have already planned 5 or more for this summer. This particular kid, I think, has got 7 planned. I think it's the defensive lineman from down in North Fort Myers. I can't remember Jackson. Anyway, do you think we'll see more of that as a trend of kids taking 6 and 7? And I know I talked to Zayden Crimpin, who you're aware of and saw at the Under Armour camp, and he told me, he goes, Pat, I'm probably going to take 8 by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, well, let's use Zayden as a great example. This is a young man who obviously has done a lot of homework in his recruitment already. He's made several visits around the country, around the state of Texas, around the Southeast. And like you said, if he's like 8 official visits, this is a guy that in his recruitment, yeah, NIL may be a factor, but it's not in his leading group of factors, which is relationship with offensive line coaches. You talk about Herb Hand. Herb Hand used to be the offensive line coach at the University of Texas.
Yep.
So his ties to the state go back probably before Zayden back when Zayden was playing Pee Wee football. Let's put it that way. I think, and then obviously the strength and conditioning of a college program is critical for Zayden, as well as the opportunity to start early, which, sometimes you got to get on campus and get a look and see what the depth chart looks like, talk to the players inside the locker room, yada, yada, yada. It's all part of the equation. But for Zayden, you love to see that. You see that he's open to taking these visits because he wants to be sure he might have a lead group of contenders. He does have a lead group of contenders. Yep. But official visits are what the red carpet opportunity for these staffs. And if they are prepared for the moment, that can either put them right into the mix at the right time, or, it kind of, just a visit, they swung their shot, a target on campus that maybe they probably wouldn't have also had a chance to get on campus prior.
Yeah, and if you're listening to us for the first time, or you have not listened to us when we've talked about Zayden before, Zayden is a kid that Florida State has put some energy and effort into. Herb Hand, Gus Malzahn, Mike Norvell all did an in-school visit with him in January. Zayden's going to come to Florida State this spring at some point, and he's going to he may add Florida State to his official visit list, which he's already, I think, got 5 planned right now. But so that's why we use Zayden as an example. Let's go back to yesterday. Let's roll back to yesterday, and Florida State got a big time commitment from 4-star linebacker Karon Maycock from Miami Central. What was your take on that, Sam? When he was on campus, I believe he was on campus January 18th for an unofficial visit. Kind of the rumor there was Miami was leading. It was a clear leader at that time. Obviously, we're going to get into the new staff here, members at Florida State in a second. But were you surprised that Florida State, in a lot of ways, was able to turn the tide on the Hurricanes and get that commitment early?
Yeah, honestly, from talking especially to our buddy John Garcia, it felt like there was a lot of confidence in Miami would end up keeping him close to home. So, but listen, Florida State has made inroads in South Florida the past couple of years. Mike Norvell's not been shy about going into that part of the state and wrestling with Miami and Coach Cristobal over top kids. And um, hey, this is a linebacker who's geared for the modern game, who's super athletic, and he's built like a tank at 6'2" and 200 plus pounds. And this is a player that probably sees an opportunity to play earlier at Florida State, where there's obviously opportunities at that position.
Yep.
And he's got the skill set, to be this athletic 3-down linebacker that's opportunistic in playing in space, darts to the football, and covers a lot of ground. And that's what you need in the ACC.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with Karon Maycock, please go to theosceola.com. We've got 2 articles on him. John Garcia's got his post-commitment comments about Florida State and why he chose Florida to commit to Florida State at this point in this process. And then I did a film breakdown, and I think you'll really, if you're a football fan, you really enjoy watching his film. The first thing that stands out is he can run and he can hit. He likes to do both, and he's good at both of them. So I think Florida State really did do well there. I want to talk to you about overall how they're doing, but before we get there, I do want to talk to you about the quarterback situation at Florida State, because we're all interested in that. It's kind of the position that moves the needle in just about every facet of the game, whether it's recruiting services covering their recruitment, whether it's NIL, where they get the money and they get the attention from the television. But listen, famously, Brady Schmeigel decommitted. And, this was probably in the works the minute Gus Malzahn stepped on campus as Florida State's offensive coordinator. But that certainly Gus comes with some benefits too, right? He's groomed a lot of really good quarterbacks, productive quarterbacks, had a lot of successful offenses. And of course, the byproduct of that was as soon as Brady decommitted, Sam, Florida State immediately, within minutes, if not hours, of that decommitment, had offered Keyshawn Henderson, the Houston commit from Lone Star State, Bowie Bentley, also from Texas, and then Landon Duckworth from Alabama. What is your take on where Florida State is with each of those 3 kids? Henderson I think he got offered by Alabama either today or yesterday. I believe you reported that, if I'm not mistaken. Where do you think they sit with those 3 kids? Because those certainly seem to be the 3 quarterbacks that Florida State has at least focused in on for now.
Yeah, obviously they're kind of they are playing from behind with all 3, but with Landon's Landon's recruitment and Bo's recruitment, it's kind of been a slow ride for 2026. A lot of these top guys are already committed. You talk about Keyshawn Henderson has been committed to Houston for over a year.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that the recruitments are necessarily shut down. We all know that, So for Bo, for all these guys, I think that Florida State is playing from behind. Having said that, there's going to be some opportunities. Obviously, all 3 have some strong connections to Florida State, have visits being locked up either for the spring and also for the summer, if not both. And we can go one by one if you want, but I think the most interesting one is starting at the top is Keyshawn Henderson.
Okay.
He is a 5-star quarterback, and he's not only from Houston, but committed early to Willie Fritz, and that staff is pretty shortly after they arrived in Houston. And he has stood by that commitment every step along the way. He was back on campus last month part of a big junior day trying to recruit players. You know the whole deal, Pat.
Yeah.
But of course, he still has like left the door open. He's going to take some official visits. He's probably not going to take 8. I can assure you of that.
Yep.
But he's going to take some official visits to schools that he laid out some criteria to me a couple of weeks ago that if they check this box, that box, and the other, he'll take a look. Florida State was among the schools he mentioned, along with Oregon and Alabama and LSU and Ole Miss. Some of the schools that obviously have a reputation developing quarterbacks and putting quarterbacks in positions to have success and beyond some of the college football's most explosive offenses, but also obviously other things related to off the field situations. So Keyshawn has to make his way to Florida State. That's going to be a big first visit. I'm not sure if you have dates set up. I know that schools are calling about him every single day out there in Houston, and he's taking this process slow, as you might expect for a 5-star quarterback that's already committed. Yeah. Now we talk about Bo Bentley from out here in Salina, Texas. Obviously picked up an offer from Florida State, among several others, after just a fantastic junior season over there. Ended in a state championship. It's still early. Texas Tech was kind of in on him early. Obviously, Joey McGuire is from that part of the state and recruits the state of Texas as well as any coach. Obviously, an in-state guy. Out there in Lubbock.
And now he's got.
I lost your audio for a second.
I said, and now Texas Tech has got the NIL to match up with everybody in the nation.
Absolutely, they've had it, and they're not going to stop. They got more backers behind them. But even though, again, for Bo, who is really just seeing his recruitment take off, in the middle of his junior season, it's still super early, and he's still getting away his rounds. He's been at Oklahoma. They're going to get him back this spring. So is Florida State, LSU, and Missouri. I think this initial visit this spring is going to obviously loom large because he's going slow. He has no OV scheduled. But Florida State is one of 4 teams, along with Texas Tech, who's kind of been there, done that with him, that are pushing for one of those critical official visits that's going to loom large. And then we go into the case of Landon Duckworth, which is really intriguing. Of course, he hasn't been to Florida State, just picked up an offer. But his relationship with Gus Malzahn, obviously he was one time committed to South Carolina. And since, he has just taken a very slow, methodical approach to his recruitment. I went to see him last fall. I think maybe he visited Auburn and Alabama, 2 in-state schools. I think one, if not both, have finally offered him. But he left the door open for South Carolina after decommitting. Talked about UCF and because of his relationship with Coach Malzahn for months. Never pulled the trigger, despite multiple visits to Orlando. That we know that relationship is critical. I think right now you're looking at a team like Ole Miss being the team that has a leg up. They just got him to campus last month. They're going to get him back to campus again next month as well. But again, you talk about this relationship with Coach Malzahn. You could make the joke that if obviously they're in a Power 4 conference, but if UCF was in the ACC or the Big Ten, maybe he would have already committed. But UCF has a reputation of just being a Group of 5 school, a group of whatever school at this point. That's not the case anymore, so the joke doesn't really last. But now that he is situated at Florida State, not only does his relationship with Coach Malzahn matter, everyone knows that Mike Norvell has a way with top quarterbacks. I think personally, knowing the 2 of them, I think that their personalities are going to sync really, really well. And I would expect Florida State to potentially join this very short list of contenders for Duckworth if that all kind of falls into place.
Yeah, and I got this question for you, and I've got my opinions on it. I think I've already expressed them, if not in writing, certainly on this show before. But, I do think one of the reasons that Brady left outside of maybe the changed from Mike giving up play calling to Gus taking it over. I know that's what he stated publicly to rivals after he was done, after he decommitted. How much do you think getting in on Henderson, Bentley, Duckworth, or really any other high quality or highly sought after quarterback will be dependent on how Florida State does in season, and in particular, how much of this is going to be predicated on the offensive line and being improved? Because I do know, in talking to at least one quarterback's father, that their issue or concern when it came to Florida State was their ability for the offensive line to protect their son. So do you think that Florida State might be able, even if they weren't a leader going into the start of the season with one of these three, with improvement on the field, could that help their status with either a Henderson, Bentley, or a Duckworth?
Yeah, I think if you ask Coach Norvell or Coach Malzahn, I think they'd like to have their quarterback committed before their season takes off. Will that be the case? To be determined. And I think that for the most part, if not all, most will be committed before they start their senior seasons.
Yep.
Now, as we saw last year with Kevin Sperry, that doesn't mean their recruitment is not necessarily finished.
Right.
I think getting these official visits and these spring is critical so that those questions you just referenced get their firsthand. Yeah, they don't have to ask the coaches. I mean, they're asking those questions now. No one's making their way to Tallahassee on without knowing what's on that roster and what this coaching staff is able to do, which they showed they could be a playoff team already. I think that getting that firsthand look and getting the official visit, though that looms really large because they're going to say something and then your point's going to come to fruition. Is this offensive line as good as they kind of looked in the what we saw when we were on campus and what Coach Hand has been telling us, and the offensive meetings, sitting down with him and Coach Malzahn and Coach Norvell. I wish I could see it. And then if that does come to fruition, that might be enough to potentially flip one of these guys. Like I said, Florida State could pull ahead with any one of these three, if not another quarterback at any point in this process. At this point, though, I do think they are playing from behind. One is already committed,
Yep.
And two have other schools that are also kind of trending, if not above, but on level footing with Florida State going into this wave of visits. So if they can't land them in June, July, and August, maybe if their promises come to fruition, they can make noise in November and December.
Yep. All right. So last week, Nick and I played this game where we were putting a percentage chance on whether they would end up with one of these three players, being Henderson, Bentley, and Duckworth at quarterback. Nick had 65%. I had 50% chance that they would end up with one of these three. If you had to put percentages on it based on what you know today, and of course it's always fluid, it always is, what would you put their percentage of landing one of these, the commitment or signing of one of these three guys?
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna regret saying this, but based off my intel on February, what is it, the 21st?
Yeah.
Like I said, they're playing from behind. Obviously, with three horses in the race, you like the chances of Florida State pulling away with one. And I really kind of liked your 50%, but I'm just gonna go a smidge lower and go 49%. Like Kevin Sperry last year, that there's a lot of quarterbacks that maybe aren't as ranked as high as these guys right now that maybe will catch up over the course of the offseason or during their senior seasons. This Coach Malzahn, Coach Norvell have a lot of, they could flip other guys. These are the three right now. They're playing from behind. I'll be back on the show sometime in July during our next slow time, and we can re-examine the situation. Yeah. I'll go 49% now, and hope that I'm I guess for your fans' sake, hope that I'm wrong.
Yeah, and listen, we said this last week. I don't think there's any reason to panic if you're Florida State, simply because Kevin Sperry was not on FSU's radar till deep into the season, and you watch his film, and I think if you're a Florida State fan, you got to be as excited about him as maybe you were anybody else that they were considering in that class at quarterback. They got him on campus, got him signed and sealed and delivered. So we'll see how it all pans out. All right. So, Florida State did get the commitment of Amari Clemens, one of the top running backs in the country. And then last week got news that they were going to get an official visit out of Xavier Crowell, the nation's #1 ranked running back in the class of 2026. Do you think there's any chance that Florida State would be able to sign both of those kids in the same class? And I think you got to take into consideration that whoever that they got Crowmaw is going to would be a sophomore. You got Cam Davis, who would be either a redshirt sophomore or junior. What do you think the chances of Florida State landing 2 elite backs in the same class will be? And I think their chances are probably helped with the fact that Malzahn's going to be they're going to take shots down the field. That's Mike's deal, but Gus is going to run the ball, and he did he had no well I think he had 2 running backs at Auburn one time that got drafted. But what do you think their chances of getting those 2 guys in the same class are?
Yeah, I think it's potentially slim, only for the fact that with Xavier Crowell, who is a teammate of Landon Duckworth, reclassified into the same class now as Duck. Much like Duck, has been to UCF and has a really strong connection to Coach Malzahn. But he was the #1 running back in the country for 2027, and now he's the #1 running back in the country for 2026. That it might be an intriguing connection, but with an expedited timeline, I feel good that potentially the #1 player in the state of Alabama is going to end up staying in the state of Alabama, the way that obviously Hugh Freeze and Auburn recruited last year.
Yeah.
You want to talk about making a statement in the state of Alabama. And guess what? I don't think Kalen DeBoer is a bad coach, and I don't think that that staff is not well equipped to recruit not only nationally, which they did at a very high clip last year, but kind of regain their footing within the state of Alabama. And they really, really like Xavier as well. So with that particular recruitment, call me boring, but I don't think that he's going to be able to leave that state coming out of Jackson, Alabama.
Yeah, it's hard. It's going to be very hard, particularly with and you're right. I think, DeBoer suffered from 2 things last year. A, he wasn't Nick Saban, and B, the conference expansion, which made the schedules just a little bit tougher on everybody. I think that Alabama will probably rebound just fine and find their way with Kalen DeBoer as head coach. All right. So, I think a lot of people have been a little bit surprised with how well Florida State has done in recruiting, coming off what was, just a disastrous season. Right now have the 11th ranked class in the class of 2026 with 7 guys committed. Caron Maycock, the linebacker from Miami, Amari Clemens, the running back, Xavier Payne, the offensive lineman, Tadarius Hughes, a safety corner, Darion Williams, wide receiver, Efren White, who will be an athlete, who's listed as an athlete, wide receiver, DB, and then Darrell Bell, a DB. What is your take on how Florida State has rebounded on the recruiting trail from what was obviously one of the most disappointing seasons in school history?
I'm honestly not surprised. Mike Norvell is a fantastic recruiting head coach, and he puts together fantastic staffs. And he lost a lot of ammunition, losing some of those pieces and coordinators and coaches from last year, and he found some really great hires that made waves pretty quickly. And this is kind of the yielding of that. Sometimes you can kind of fall into a pit if you're a program, and coming off of, like you said, a lackluster, disappointing season. You can kind of recruit at that level. You can recruit down, or you just kind of come up short in a lot of recruiting battles. Well, Florida State's doing the opposite. They're going after the same guys that they are high on, and they're winning critical in-state recruiting battles for four-star kids and plus. They're just outside the top 10. I love that this is ultimately going to become the foundation of their class. I'm watching these official visits, and I'm getting my head is spinning on the screen, thinking about how much work I have ahead of me, keeping pace with these visits coming up. But that's double digit candidates to potentially join this class and be
Yep.
targets down the stretch for Coach Norvell and company. And when you're working with the number 11 recruiting class in the country and a lot of really talented in-state guys that, yeah, they'll take a few visits. They'll probably take visits to Florida and Miami and maybe an out-of-state school if they have a strong enough connection there. But I think that, those are guys that are ultimately going to kind of comprise the foundation of your class. And I think that they're seeing opportunities that are available to them, and that's what you want your coaching staff to do. Sell them on the product that's on the field, and sell them the opportunity that, hey, if you're good enough, you see that we have a need at wide receiver. Come in and come in as a mid-year enrollee and compete for playing time right away. And if you're the best player, you'll play. And I think kids want to play for Coach Norvell. They want to play for a lot of these coaches and coordinators in Tallahassee. And that this program is not that far removed from some really, really fantastic seasons.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about some of the guys. Obviously, he hired Gus Malzahn, Herb Hand, Tim Harris Jr. on the offensive side of the ball, Tony White, Terrence Knighton, and Evan Cooper on the defensive side of the ball. I've got a little bit of a previous relationship with Herb Hand. I met him 20 years ago at a high school football game in Sarasota. Don't ask me how I remember that, but I think it was Booker and Riverview, and a great game on a random Friday night in November, standing on the sidelines with a bunch of coaches. And obviously, he has a proven track record. As you said, he's been at Auburn, Texas, Penn State, Vandy, UCF. But tell me a little bit about your take, because I really feel like they've elevated offensive line recruiting since Herb has gotten on campus. I kind of feel the same way overall defensively, and particularly in some areas of Florida. I think they've improved in the Tampa area specifically. I'm not even sure which coach has been reassigned to Tampa for Florida State. And, but tell me what your experience has been with these guys as recruiters, and which of those six guys are, which two of those six strike you as the strongest recruiters? And not to say that all of them aren't strong recruiters, but I don't want to keep you all day to talk about all six new assistant coaches. But what are your thoughts on what they've brought to Florida State? Not necessarily on the practice field and on game day, but more specifically when it comes to the recruiting trail.
Well, thank you, Pat, because I was trying to think of clips for each one of these
Yeah,
guys.
no,
And
no, just give me two.
I was like, man, I need to look at my phone real quick, and I don't know
No,
how I'm going to be able to pull that one
no,
off. But no, I think, I think probably the coach that drew the most buzz from recruits was Terrence Knighton coming over from Nebraska. Obviously, Coach Norvell saw what Coach Rule was doing out there in Nebraska and said he's bringing them into warmer climates to recruit some of these players out here in the Southeast, as well as Tony White. I think what those two have done is, I don't want to say that Florida State was off in their recruiting, because they were recruiting fantastic players beforehand, but I think it kind of reinvigorated them on the recruiting trail a little bit. You saw, I would say, I think about someone like Jamarion Carlton out here from Texas, who's said his first offer came from Coach Knighton, and he's going to try to get to Florida State at some point this offseason. The interest is there. Or someone like Samari Matthews, who's been to Florida State a couple of different times, but then they add Coach White to the staff, and now Florida State is in his lead group, in his top four. Obviously, there is a gap between Florida State and some of the lead guys, but like I said, Florida State feels revitalized in a lot of these recruitments. Maybe they weren't at the top with everyone, but adding some of these, Gus Malzahn to now help recruit Landon Duckworth, or Tony White to recruit Samari Matthews, a little bit more firepower than what you previously had, coming off what they just did. But I think you look at someone like Herb Hand, who just brings, like you said, 20 plus years of professionalism at the position, get someone like Lamar Brown to now go and take an official visit to Florida State. That's been a team that's been trying to get this kid from Louisiana on campus for 2 years. Now it's going to happen. I just think that you kind of have a nice combination of youth and energy with professionalism and track record and reputation, where I think you kind of improve a little bit on the recruiting trail, you improve a little bit on the field, and you improve a little bit. In the locker rooms with the culture of Florida State that Mike Norvell is continuing to instill, and obviously the development aspect. And I think that these guys as a whole check a lot of those boxes. And I think, like you said, but I think this, if they have this success on the field, it's gonna all the other effects are gonna yield on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. They're gonna become a hot place to transfer to, as they have been. Um, it's one step after the next, and I think these are the guys equipped to kind of make those kind of moves.
Yeah. Are there any guys that you're paying close attention to now that you think Florida State could be close on? A kid like a Trenton Henderson from Pensacola, who, by all I know, he's going to take a number of official visits, but it really seems to be a Florida State Auburn battle for him right now. Anybody that you're paying particularly close attention to that you think Florida State is right in the thick of it and could be in not the top five, but maybe the top one, or let's say the top two, that people should keep an eye on here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I would stick right with that with Trenton Henderson, like you mentioned. He was an early offer for this staff, right? Obviously, from right there in the Panhandle, he's seen his recruitment take off. He's continued to become a more nationally known name. But this is where Florida State wins: is keeping guys close to home, or keeping guys in state, and really talented edge. I think this is where you see Terrence Knighton kind of flex his muscle here as a national recruiter, trying to now keep someone home. I think he's been able to do that when he's been in Lincoln, Nebraska, bringing talent up to Nebraska, and now he's going to try to keep someone close to home in Florida State, and I think this is where he has a chance to flex that muscle.
Yep. All right, and one last question, just because it's new, it's relatively new with obviously the advent of no restrictions on the number of official visits, other than the fact that you can only take one to a school, but there's no limit on the number of schools. But you can take one to any one school unless there's a head coaching change, and you can take a second. But something that's new to the recruiting calendar is weekday official visits. And sometimes when I see a weekday official visit, my reaction is, well, they're getting an official visit out of the kid, but he's not coming for the weekend. Now, there's two ways to look at that, right? If he comes on a weekend, he's grouped in with a bunch of players. And he's just one of 10 or one of 8 or one of 12. You come in on a Sunday night, leave on a Tuesday, come in on a Monday, leave on a Wednesday. You're getting more one-on-one time, but there's also, you lose some of that energy from a weekend visit with what's going on, the atmosphere of town. Of course, now listen, for some of the higher level kids, I know it's still recruiting. I think some of it is negotiation these days. And listen, you're bringing them in the summer when campus is not as active as it would be in December or January with kids, with the entire enrolled student body on campus. In summertime, it's a little bit more, probably about half the kids on campus. But do you take away anything when you see a kid plan a weekday official visit, as opposed to a weekend official visit? This is just me thinking out loud, trying to read too much into kids setting dates.
No, you know what? I'm glad you said it, because I think in the past I've had kind of your take as well. And then it's kind of shifted for me in the past year, I would say. I'm trying to think of his name. His name is escaping me, but he's a 5-star from last year's class, who from California, who signed with Alabama. And he was kind of going over his official visits with me, and I'm like, how is this? Doesn't make sense to me. This is someone who, unfortunately, I have to be on planes quite a bit. And one of my big pet peeves is like, how do you go this way when you have to go that way, and why would you not make it in order? Whatever.
Yeah.
To someone with OCD and someone who's getting old. So, but the summers are now so littered with not only official visits, but other national events. We talk about the Rivals 5-star. these all-star 7-on-7s, these Elite 11 camps that include different skill position players, other camps and lineman activities for the best of the best in the country who are also making official visits like the rest of us, like everyone else. And then not to mention, some seniors still also have to like camp at some schools. At that point in their recruiting process, maybe they're coming off injury. Clemson is famous for making kids camp, but it's all around the country in certain positions. Ohio State as well. So if they haven't, maybe they do want a time or to see what they look like in person. So I think the way that it's scheduled, I take less of it now because they're trying to just squeeze everything in.
Right.
And like you said, you can look at it either way. Friday, it's like all the glitz, the glam. It's the weekend. There's a lot of energy. You've seen that before, but sometimes not. Devontae Smith, who just won a Super Bowl, was the Heisman Trophy winner, did everything at Alabama, sat in his hotel room the entirety of his official visit with his girlfriend. And just sat
Yeah.
and then wait until he could sit down with the coaches, Coach Napier and Coach Saban, and just commit to the program and saw the way So to some kids, yeah, it is the official visit atmosphere, the energy and culture, and for others, it's just about business. Whether that's where I'm going to be developed, or do we need to, where do I sign here?
Yeah. All right. Well, I got a couple more questions for you. Then we'll let you go. These are much more about recruiting in general. Listen, the calendar's gotten crazy, right? I don't know how the coaches do it. I haven't worked for a major college football program since 2013, and it was much different. All the National Signing Day was still in February. Camps were the big thing in June and July. That wasn't official visits. What would you like to see the NCAA or whoever's going to be the governing body of college football? What is one adjustment that you would like to see to the recruiting calendar? Because and this mixes in the portal, is if you're going to allow kids to visit April, May, and June for official visits, let's have an early signing period in July or August and get this out of the way. And that's one less thing for coaches to worry about. What would be one thing that you would like to see change on the recruiting calendar?
Yeah, I think that the signing day situation needs to be altered. This year was, I'm thinking so selfishly, but I know that I can speak for not only people who cover this, but the coaches involved, the parents of the kids and their families. It's a jam packed situation at this point. I mean, if you think from the summer and this, summer official visits to a senior season to locking in and signing and graduating, potentially playing in an all-star game, being on campus. It's a lot, and in some cases, it's a lot more convoluted than that. And
Yep.
that, Pat. Um, so I think that if they're gonna, I think there should be one signing day again. And I think the placement of that signing day, and if they want to keep two, that's also fine. They need to be moved around to
Yep.
be um, more in line with this new expedited timeline. They could do it, before their senior seasons, and this way they're safeguarded should an injury pop up. You can put that in their whatever. I don't think they sign scholarship papers anymore, but whatever things contracts they're dealing with. Um, and the kids that don't, maybe that stays in December. But when you put it in February, I mean, as we are now seeing, we're already knee deep into the 2026 cycle.
Yep.
Um, and 2 weeks later, there's official visits being set up. So as this becomes more business like, we need a more efficient approach to signing days.
Yep, I agree with you. Something's got to change. And listen, these guys are making a ton of money, but and who much is given, much is expected. But listen, the calendar of these coaches, you're going to run off some really good coaches if you don't. They're going to make their money. They're going to go to the NFL. Or they're going to get out if they don't start. And listen, it's a young man's game. It always has been. But I think as you get older, your patience for recruiting probably is not what it used to be. But all right, so another this is just more of a football question. I started seeing this today as I was doing some recruiting research online, and I know that I think the SEC and the Big Ten just had a joint meeting in either Dallas or New Orleans, or they're getting ready to. And there was some news today on some potential or proposed changes to championship weekend, where as opposed to allowing teams to get a bye and still make the playoffs, you might have 6 Big Ten teams play on championship weekend, 6 teams in the SEC play on championship weekend. And I know one model was in each conference, 1 would play 2, 3 would play 4, 5 would play 6. Then there was another model, 1 plays 2, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. And of course, I think a lot of that is contingent on those two particular conferences getting a locked in 3 or 4 spots into the playoffs. So I guess those other two, you could say that 1 and 2 are definitely getting in from both conferences, whether they win or lose that game. But it's almost like a play-in game for the other two games. What are your initial thoughts on hearing that, or have you even seen that?
Haven't seen it.
Okay.
Don't truly love it. Maybe. I mean, I would say this though. I mean, from the playoff, I did like the playoff sense, but from what I thought it took away was that the other bowl games kind of fell by the wayside. I felt like they kind of, there was so much playoffs going on that you kind of, the bowl game seemed, a little bit off. So I think that if they want to try to find a way to spruce up one or adjust, I'm sure they will. But I don't feel too strongly. I do feel that play-in games and limiting to the conferences is just, I think it's just asking for more pandemonium.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, whether they keep it at 12, go to 14, which would still have some buys included, or take the buys out of it, which is what I think they ought to do. I think they ought to go to 16 or 8 and let that be the number. I think that's going to be very interesting. But all right, Sam, I could ask you a lot more questions. I had one. We've already been on here 45 minutes, and like you said, it's been a busy day. Listen, we appreciate the time, appreciate the expertise. You're welcome anytime you want to come on, whether it's for a segment, whether it's for a whole show. But we appreciate you having you on here, and would love to have you back again. If you're just joining us, we're about to sign off, but we've had Sam Spiegelman, a national recruiting analyst for Rivals, join us to talk a little bit about Florida State football recruiting 2026. And appreciate it, Sam. If you're not a member of the subscriber to the Osceola, please go to theosceola.com or Florida State .rivals.com, floridastate.rivals.com, and subscribe to the Osceola. We got all the coverage of Karon Maycock's commitment to Florida State. We've got multiple recruiting notebooks in for this week, including the latest offers, prospects that have set official visits. Xavier Payne has set an official visit with Florida State, who's committed to Florida State. Donnell Robinson Jr., offensive lineman, that's just set a official visit to Florida State, as has defensive tackle Carter Lucky and tight end Kai Wesley. But you can go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check that out. You can also go before you leave here, if you're watching this, please subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel and hit that notification button so that you get live updates when we're going to do a show live or tape. But we appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll be back next week with Seminole Sidelines. Thank you, Sam. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Thanks, Pat.